Good morning and welcome. You're watching Good Morning Sri Lanka. Today is the 4th of June. It's the Posun Poya Day, and some of you, or most of you, are home taking a break. Thank you for joining us on the show. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Prashant. I'm very thankful of because originally my plan was to dress down today because of being a holiday. Then you show up.
Dress for the occasion of the holiday.
Dress for the occasion of the holiday. Welcome, folks. It is a Monday. Very interesting show. We got some informative stories, and also, and more importantly, because tomorrow is a National Environmental Day, if I'm not mistaken, and we will have someone inside the studio who will tell us about what actually, or sometimes I wonder about what do we do, should we discard some of, say, a TV, which technically I don't think I'll ever do, but what happens to them?
It's an interesting aspect because in this entire week there's a lot of attention on environmental issues around the world, mainly because of the Rio Summit for environmental protection and also conservation and so on and so forth. So we've got an amazing guest who's doing phenomenal work in Sri Lanka. We're going to talk about what he's doing and how he can be part of making sure our environment is safer. But before we get to all of that, we have a very interesting and exciting news.
Yes, promotion. Yes, and speaking of the environment and our surroundings, if you've been around the country anywhere, it could be your favorite spot down south, your favorite hideaway up in hill country, and you have some pictures. All you need to do is simply email a picture, along with a description from 100 to 150 words as to what you have experienced. This is, of course, for your weekend getaway promotion. It's MTV Sports at Maharaja.lk. We have extended a promotion because we wanted you folks to have a better chance of winning a weekend getaway for two. So it's MTV Sports at Maharaja.lk. Remember, you need to send us a photo, not just a description of your vacation. As much as we love reading about them, we would like to see what you've, at least, or get a feel of what you've experienced. So that's 100 to 150 words of any trip that you've taken in the country. MTV Sports at Maharaja.lk. It's a weekend getaway for two.
And like you said, it's extremely fitting, the fact that we're doing this on a week that we're focusing on the environment to celebrate the beauty that you've seen around the country. And I'm telling you, to get a free deal for two people for a weekend out in the mountains, that's a pretty sweet deal. So do send it in. We're eager to read your stuff. We are impressed by what we read so far, and hopefully we'll have much more coming in.
But don't forget the pictures. Like what I said, as much as we would like to read about your experience, we like to see a little bit of that experience.
Yes, we do. Well, also now we want to talk, because it's a Monday, we want to catch up on what's happening around the world. And one special news segment that's been getting a lot of news is what's happening to the economy around the world, especially in Europe. Greece has been threatened that they might have to leave the Eurozone, and they may not be part of the Eurodollar anymore if it continues in this fashion. And all across Europe, they're talking of austerity measures, especially trying to make sure they don't spend more than they can, trying to have budget cuts. So it's interesting times.
And also part of this little story that we'll be sharing with you is, of course, a major concern for most people who are the first or are very loyal users of the smartphone. Technically, the first one of its kind that caters to the business to the business community, but then kind of ventured out of that box and wanted to be hip, and somehow didn't work out for them. So also a little story about that.
Yeah, especially as you're talking, BlackBerry is having a little bit of an issue. Right?
Research in motion.
BlackBerry is becoming black and blue these days, so we've got a little story on that to see the woes of BlackBerry and would it last through a new age of highly competitive smartphones out there. Check this out.
Wall Street had its biggest slide in about 2 weeks as worries about Europe pop up again. Blue chips lost 160 points. The S&P 500 was down 19 points. The NASDAQ gave back 33 points. That money flowing out of stocks found a home in the safety of U.S. Treasuries, but at what return? Yields on the 10-year note touched its lowest in about 6 decades, falling as low as the 1.61% area. Nervous investors also dumped oil. NYMEX crude closed at a 7-month low below $88 a barrel. Why the new worry? An anti-bailout party in Greece has taken the lead in a new poll ahead of national elections next month, putting the thought of a Greek exit from the Eurozone back on investors' minds. Also, borrowing costs in Spain are pushing near the point that caused other Eurozone countries to seek bailouts. U.S. listed shares of Research in Motion lost about 8% as investors try to figure out what's next for the maker of the once ubiquitous BlackBerry device now that it's hired bankers to review the business. And the selling continues for Facebook. Shares have lost more than a quarter of their IPO value. Economic data held little sway on investor psychology. Signed contracts for home purchases surprisingly dropped in April, hitting a 4-month low. Some economists say that's payback for early activity tied to the unusually warm winter. Wrapping up with a look at Europe, France led the pack with a more than 2% decline, followed closely by drops in Germany and the UK. Conway Gittins, Reuters.
Well, that's a story from Wall Street and what's going on around in Europe as well. Things are pretty desperate for some of the countries and economies. And then we also promised you that we'll have a story on the BlackBerry situation and how they're not doing well either.
But the most interesting one is the story about about Facebook. I remember when it was launched on a Friday at the IPO, it was staggering. There was an estimate that every single employee at Facebook was, on paper, worth $4.9 million after the IPO was released. Following day, it went on a major breakdown, like a slump. Now I wonder how much each employee now is worth.
Well, it definitely was not as expected. They were hoping for something much better than it's got below a quarter of its value now. So
how is Mark? Mark was supposed to be worth $19 billion after the IPO.
Well, I'm still sure he's pretty much worth quite
17.
a bit. But, however, the IPO didn't go the way they planned. We will keep you up to date on that. We've been following the whole Facebook IPO from the very beginning. We'll continue to do that as the story unfolds. But right now, we want to go back to the story on the BlackBerries we talked about before. It's kind of interesting. They're going black and blue. Check this out.
Call it the black and blueberry. Research in Motion has been beaten to a pulp and is now looking for a white knight, someone that can come in and save it from the downward spiral that has taken 75% of the value off its stock and made its signature BlackBerries fond memories for happy iPhone and Android users. The company has hired J.P. Morgan Chase and RBC Capital Markets to explore options, which could include a sale of all or parts of the company or licensing agreements. Jefferies analyst Peter Mtvgmsl calls the situation disastrous, but says there are companies that might be interested in some sort of deal.
The handful of players that would make sense in that scenario would be either an Amazon, a Microsoft, potentially a Facebook, but frankly, Facebook's not interested in the corporate side, so that'd be a less clean situation. A Samsung might be interested to some extent, and then the Chinese we think would be interested.
One element that could lure in buyers, the patents. Those alone could be worth an estimated $6 billion, just about the current market value of the company. JMP Securities' Alex Gauna just raised his rating on the stock from sell to neutral.
I think the most likely scenario for Research in Motion in terms of preserving what value is left of the company comes in a breakup scenario. And I think that there is some value in the brand and some value in the 78 million or so subscribers that are out there. And that value would be in the hands of a large wireless handset player such as a Huawei or a Samsung that could take advantage of that brand.
But the clock is ticking on RIM's value, especially because their next generation of devices with a new operating system are not coming out until later this year, just about when the iPhone 5 is expected.
iPhone 5 is expected, and BlackBerry is going to have more trouble. For all you Mac fans and Apple fans, well, they're doing much better on that end.
Well, apparently, October is the target release. That is according to the rumor circulating about the 5. The BlackBerry, the thing is, when they started to be hipper and cooler with the touchscreen, I've always believed that never mess up with something that's working perfectly. Let the Androids do what Androids do, and let a BlackBerry do what a BlackBerry.
Well, they certainly didn't listen to your advice or
yeah.
anybody's advice. But we'll see how it goes. But it's interesting, when a company's value, the brand name value, is as equivalent to its market value, that's when you know things are not really going well. They've got to really expand their horizons. But today when we talk mainly about the environment, I think it's a good segue. Is we all use these electronic items. It's become so much part of our lives. It's almost like we have these things all the time. It's closer than a friend and a relative at times.
That's true. And I just realized before we used to just worry about plastics and biodegradable and waste like that. But now there is the big concern about the electronic waste that we are also that we're also putting out there. And also, like what you said, we are very much dependent on all these stuff. How many phone numbers do you know by heart now? Remember when you were still in school that you know every single person's number of your classmates?
I'm
now,
lucky if I know my number now.
Yeah, my number and probably my home number at the home in the Philippines, but not even here.
But the crazy thing is, because we're using so much of electronic items, and the fact that we always upgrade ourselves from one to the other, like we're talking of iPhone 5 coming up, for all those who are using iPhone 4 or even 3, you're all going to take one step up and buy the next one. But what are you going to do with what you have? That's what we're talking about, because we're talking about the environment. We've got a man who knows a lot about it. We're getting ready for that conversation. But before we do, we actually have some interesting stories on how they've been doing this in Chile. And it's interesting how companies are taking a look at this becoming an issue all across the world, not only in the developed world, it's in the developing world as well. People are using more and more electronics. How are they disposing of it? And how can you do it in a better way? So we have a special story about this from Chile, about solid waste. The recycle company located in the suburb of Chile capital city Santiago is the first green enterprise to recycle electronic waste in Latin America. Half of the company's employees have criminal records. Some say the company's name not only means giving new purpose to waste products, but also a new shot at livelihoods. Though the company's neighborhood is picturesque, the company is home to piles of such electronic waste as TV sets, computers, refrigerators, and cell phones. Cell phone makes up the largest portion of the trash. Young Chileans users change their phones almost every day. Workers there dismantle, sort, and package all the electronic products before sending them sorted parts to the other locations around the world, like Europe, for further reprocessing. In the end, the waste will be turned into other renewable materials like electronic components, raw metals, and plastics. According to the company's owner, the company can process more than 1,000 tons of electronic waste every year with its 40-plus employees. Marcelo Españo, an old employee of the company, once served a jail term like many other employees in the company. He found a job in Recycla right after coming out of prison, as the company has an employment contract with the prison. Marcelo's salary now is enough for him to support his family of 4. The company provides its employees with free training course so that they could own certain professional skills. That's a pretty phenomenal effort taking place in Chile.
Very good story there. And also a hopeful story, because it's basically after most of the people who have served time, according to the statistics released in the States, chances are they'll go back because there's nowhere else for them to go. But now in Chile, a hope for a future is given to them.
And I think it's also very therapeutic in the fact of you're helping restore something that would have been just junk.
Yes.
You're helping restore it and make sure that it's deposited in the right way back in this environment. Kind of therapeutic for the person who's been through a criminal record. It's kind of repairing yourself and trying to do something positive. It's a very innovative idea for social change and also environmental solutions.
Yeah, that is true. It's not only therapeutic for the environment, also for yourself, for regaining your self-respect.
Yeah, very much so, especially for people who can now afford a living and live off it. So, brilliant idea from Chile. But we've got our own brilliant ideas here in Sri Lanka, and on Good Morning Sri Lanka this morning. Like we promised, we've got our own initiative by a very interesting gentleman who's joined us in the studios. But when we come back, we've got all of that interview in store for you. Don't go anywhere.